gallery. April. We acknowledge Jerry as a community.
Mighty God, I ask you to bless and its delivery.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army, and made this supreme sacrifice, freedom and democracy. Also proclaim our gratitude.
We have some apologies this evening. Councillor David Kemp is now with these items, leave a note item before seconder of the field. And that was moved by Councillor. We have, due to the lapse in time, an alternative. Item, given the delay from that recommendation. So, Schofields and Councillor Robertson. That's the case. And Councillor Roberts, would either of you like to discuss?
Deputy Mayor, yeah, this is good. It's extensible. But needed to be done, and putting it over 2 years is achieve the trick. Fellows.
I just seek to clarify with the activated crossing and what I can see that retains that orange barrier, well, marked in orange barrier, so no right-hand turn from Victor CBD side into Grantley, is that correct?
Through the chair, this diagram here, Councillor Lidley, is the proposed temporary work. So the design, the final design we're still working on with it and with Steam Ranger. So it may be, well as that question, and in relation to Anne has previously asked a question about turning right the other. So we're still working on the design of, but the likelihood is that that temporary works, if it's approved, if the final design is approved, that it will remain
just going to flag that I can't support this in that case, given the flow and effect of traffic movement through an area that we are looking at also down by the causeway. We're already raised that there's issues with pedestrian access through there, or pedestrian safety issues there. I can see that not allowing a right-hand turn into the Grantley Avenue crossing. And I understand what it's trying to achieve, but I think that we run the risk of pushing trailered vehicles through that pedestrian crossing and past our playgrounds and into that busy pedestrian area, because that is the only way to access that, pretty much the only way. We do have one other turn there, but it's not a appropriate turn by the tennis courts there. Air Terrace is the one. That presents the same problems as this would, I believe. So I can't support it with even a temporary measure in there. I understand what's trying to be achieved, but I think we're creating an issue somewhere else, and it's probably a more serious issue somewhere else when it comes to pedestrians, a highly pedestrian area that we've identified as an issue already. Take trailered vehicles through there, because that's how people would access that yacht club with trailered boats, would be right along that foreshore.
Thank you, Councillor Litterley. Is there any further discussion of this item? Councillor Glasbrook?
Well, firstly, I must apologise. I've missed the briefing on this, so I probably missed a little bit of information, but I can't support it either, probably for a different reason. This is just a terrible intersection, in my opinion. This is a disaster. If you're a pedestrian trying to walk where we're about to build a new footpath from the on the seaside of Highmarsh Road, across that intersection, it is terrible. I do it quite often because where I live, I walk to Victor. When vehicles are coming from the tennis courts and turning left, you don't know which lane they're going to go into. You don't know which way they're going. I believe it's dangerous. I realise that it will put pressure on other areas, but I just think it's never going to be a successful. Whatever we do is not going to be successful other than close it off. That's still. I won't support it either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Is there any further debate? No. Councillor Schofield, you moved the item. Would you like to?
Look, there's been a huge amount of discussion on this, plus a meeting with Steam Ranger.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. With the debate closed, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? That motion is tied, which then would give me the casting vote. I think, yeah, my thoughts around this are probably somewhere in the middle of Councillor Glasbrook and Councillor Litterley's, in terms of, I think there are still unanswered concerns around it. I think the way we were headed anyway in looking to financial years 22, 23 and 23, 24 gives us the time to settle on a solution that is supported by the majority of the chamber. And so I will be casting my vote in the negative and against this motion. Declare the motion lost on the casting. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is 4.2. There are other finalisation of current design stage. Again, we need to receive and note the agenda item and then move into the item itself. So I'll ask to move that way, Councillor Henderson, and seconding Councillor Ann. Is there any discussion receiving and noting the agenda item report? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So we pick up the resolution as it was. You'll notice that in the agenda for this evening, there is also a part 2 that is not part of the motion that is active on the floor, because it is an additional segment. So, Councillor Henderson, you move the motion. Would you like to it?
All I want to say is that this was delayed because of some information that came to the meeting just before the meeting last time. So I think it's all very straightforward. We've had the discussions. We had the discussion in the last meeting. We've had a workshop since to clear up what that additional information was about. And I think that's all the discussion is required.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Schofield, you are the seconder. Do you wish to add anything? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do any other members? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I agree with the design and all the effort that's gone into this Arts and Culture Centre. It's not the end of the cost of it. This is just the capital cost. It's not operational costs. But I note that at present, the cost of this centre is $18 million estimated, and it will surely go up. So I'd just like to make it be noted that we are still going to face problems financing this arts and culture. May have to be broken down into stages, perhaps one way around it, but by the time we get onto this, which I believe it presently is 25-26 financial year, that the cost will have gone up quite a bit at that time. So there's been an enormous amount of effort gone into this, but I think we'll be at least under as big a financial pressure in 25-26 as we are today in terms of putting this up. And I mentioned we still don't know really how much the cost will be to operate the centre.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there any further discussion? Glasbrook?
Well, I won't be supporting this recommendation. I can't really understand why we would want to lodge for a development application, as we know that it has been put off in our long-term plan some years. And I'm fairly confident that something will change in that time. And when the next council comes along, there'll be new ideas and there'll be maybe more different opportunities. Maybe someone will come along and want to partner with us, or who knows. So I really just think we're just getting a little bit far down the track. I'm happy to have the plan sitting there, but I really don't see why we would put in a development application. So I'll not vote for it for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question through the Deputy Mayor to Director. I believe last time we discussed this motion and it came up, there was some benefit around potentially staging it or having these plans approved or going through this motion to then look at earlier works if they became available subject to grant funding. Would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor, essentially the benefit of continuing with some of these design aspects and getting it ready for a development approval or achieving a development approval puts it in a position whereby if grant funding does become available for part or all of the building, council actually has as close as it can get to at this stage a development ready project waiting. So that was one of the reasons for continuing and achieving a development application. There was a few others, I think that they were detailed in the report as well. Another one was just keeping faith with the community that have been, particularly the arts and culture community that have come on board with this project for a number of years now, and so that they can see some progress continuing. The dates that Councillor Robertson mentioned earlier was actually a little bit longer out than that for construction. I think it was closer to 27, 28. Those dates with detailed design at about 23 or 25 or 23, 24 perhaps. So there were a couple of the reasons for bringing it on earlier. Specifically, some of this also hinges around a bid in council for next financial year for a staging of the project, or a staged detailed design and specification for the cinema component alone, done fairly deliberately so that we can preferably sooner rather than later achieve a compliance upgrade for the cinema in terms of accessibility and fire requirements, but that also then provides an ability to hook any funding that we might be able to get for a cinema, which wouldn't usually be available from a commercial point of perspective, but rather from a point of view that it would be stage one of an arts and culture centre. So hopefully, Councillor Mann, that helps answer your questions.
Thank you, Director Pathouse. Councillor Littley?
Yeah, just based on what Director Pathouse just said there, I do see some value in moving to this stage of being able to lodge a development application based on the fact that past couple of years should show us that we don't know where things might go and what grants might be available, how governments of the day might act, and to be able to be in a position to pivot quickly for our future council, and have that there, I think, is an advantage. So I will support this. I'm not in any rush to see the project move forward, but I think this would be a reasonable spend to get it to that stage.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. That would be everyone has spoken. Councillor Henderson, do you wish to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think we've all learned by experience being in this chamber that the longer we delay major projects, the more likely the costs of those major projects will increase. And we've seen that recently with the COVID situation, making the cost of everything higher than it was prior to that. But also, we've also had a very good example in this council of having shovel-ready projects ready to go to apply for funding when something like COVID comes along. We had 2 major projects shovel-ready at that stage, and because they were at that stage, we were able to receive, I think it was 50% funding for each of those major projects, which have since gone ahead. So there are many advantages to having projects at that shovel-ready stage, that final design stage, ready to go, so that we can apply for funding when those chances become available.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, for closing debate. I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour and those against, that motion is carried. With that completed. That way, Councillor Robertson. Someone second, Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
I think the major part of this $75,000 additional is a recognition that where we have decided, I guess it's not ever going to change, that we are not going for a greenfield site. We're going to put this centre inside some historic and heritage buildings. And one thing that we haven't done yet, and this is a good forewarning for all of the heritage buildings we have in Victor Harbor, is that these days you don't get anywhere with grant funding. You don't get anywhere with getting an easy ride on modifying or improving those buildings if you don't have a heritage conservation plan in place. We don't have that for especially the old town hall, but also for the cinema, and so this is really quite an integral part of the first motion. We need to have that done and included in, I think, a fairly significant chunk of this fund. The 75,000 is related to some sort of very fancy technology. If you want an explanation of it, Graham can give it to you, but it's basically running laser beams around the inside of the building, check that it is all square and stuff that you can't see from the outside, that it's not developing big cracks or that it's starting to lean, you can't see it. So which would in fact then determine whether suitability, etc., is critical for the architectural design. So this part here is money that we should be spending anyway. I don't see anything on the horizon that says we're not going to use these old buildings, put our centre in. So this is primarily targeted at making it possible to go ahead with development application.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Schofield, do you wish to speak at all? No? Would any other members like to speak to this motion? If not, we'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. We move on to agenda item 5.1, which is minutes of the previous meeting, 28th of March 2022. The recommendation is that they be confirmed as true and accurate. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson. And someone to second that? Councillor Henderson. Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, I'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Which brings us on to item 6, deputations. We do have a deputation this evening. We have Simon Tonkin from Masterplan SAPL on behalf of the Bluff Management Proprietary Limited, ATF Whalers Resort Apartments Unit Trust. Please join us at the end table. There'll be 10 minutes for this deputation. So we suggest 5 minutes to present and then some time for elected members to ask questions afterwards. So take it away, Simon. Just press the button on the microphone, it should light up. Oh, there we go, beautiful.
D-Robe. Thank you very much. Members, my name is Simon Tonkin from Masterplan, as you know, and I act for concerned owners of property who are immediately affected by Council's invitation to make submissions on time-limited parking. I want to speak to the current situation, the historical context and the future. Council has invited submissions on a proposal to time limit parking in the area to the rear of the apartments on Jagger Road. However, I believe the question before us is more fundamental than that, certainly more fundamental than limiting time. It is, for my clients, more about whether the council has an unfettered right or ability to make this area available to the public. It is, in essence, will contradict existing approvals as we note them. Come to that momentarily. We note also that council has, if you like, preempted the outcome of any of these propositions somewhat, as it has erected public parking signs at the entrance to Jagger Road in advance of any determination in relation to this. Notwithstanding, it doesn't identify whether it's timed or untimed parking. The assumption that has been made is that Jagger Road does not have any other constraint that lies over it. This area of Jagger Road is used by the Whalers Resort and the apartments and others, comfortable but generally high occupancy rate. Therefore, the demand for parking is satisfied in this area that council seeks to limit time. That would have a direct financial and operational impact on the current operators. The demand for car parking, in fact, has escalated as a direct consequence, as noted by Council, of the failure to design and construct the boat ramp facilities with adequate car parking and trailer parking. And that's evident by the use of other land in the locality as well. From a historical context perspective, since the late 80s, there have been various approvals issued that affect this land. Many of these approvals have a common theme of requiring the beneficiary of the approvals to develop and maintain the, quote, driveway and car parking areas, unquote, and I reference approvals back as far as 1987. Again, there were stipulations in the various consents as to the design and the treatment of the driveways and car park. Those conditions are referenced in applications made and approved by this authority in 2000, 2007 and 2012, and maybe others. Our client in the past has also made several requests of Council to provide copies of application documents to better inform them of this matter. At the last occasion, a meeting on site, documents were promised. None were provided. None have been provided. My office made inquiries of Council and received copies of various approvals, but have been informed that to gain access to plans and other documents, reports and the like that associate with those approvals, we would have to make an FOI application. I believe this is prejudicial to my clients' needs and to their rights as far as understanding the consents and the approvals that reside over and adjacent to their land. Our client again requests a copy of all documents as the respective owners of the properties affected. It appears, therefore, that the Council may have made some assumptions about the car park area without adequate investigation as to its utilisation and its relationship that these car parks have to the resort accommodation and the history that attaches thereto. Maybe Council was also premature in placing public car park signs directing the public to these spaces. Perhaps the Council should have consulted with the owners most affected prior to erecting these signs and prior to inviting submissions in relation to timed parking, when it's quite unclear as to whether or not Council is able to use that land given the approvals that have been issued, which inextricably tie that land to those approvals. And as a consequence, I believe Council should have investigated and better foreshadowed car parking demand for the boat ramp. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the position we are today. The owners paid for the paving and of the road and the car parks, as Council at the time did not appear interested in developing Jagger Road, probably because the Jagger Road would only benefit the development, and that is understandable. Council willingly and purposefully allowed the development to assume the land and included that land and the car parks and the roadway works in the planning consents. Those planning consents remain valid today. Car parks are fundamental to the proper function of the apartments. Any limit on times would seriously prejudice their operation. Some time ago, attempts were also made to negotiate with Council the purchase of the land, and at the 11th hour, Council withdrew from those discussions for no apparent reason, according to the documents that are available to me. However, further information may be available on the files, which I've not yet been able to see. We respectfully request that full and proper investigations be performed in consultation with the owners, that all documents be provided to the owners as previously requested. In the meantime, Council remove the parking sign, and given the works performed to create the driveway and car parks, the ongoing maintenance that is undertaken by the owners, the consents that exist, and certainly in the absence of any interest in this land to maintain the land or consider the land by Council until now, our client seeks a commitment from council that it will sincerely engage with the owners and not prejudice their existing use rights and their approvals. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tonkin. We have 3 minutes remaining of the 10 minutes allowed for the deputation. So, elected members, are there any questions? Mr. Tonkin. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Tonkin. You've obviously done a lot of preparation for this event, or for this presentation. And I see the need for the last part that you've talked about, that now if that in fact the case that your client hasn't received due process on several issues over the last couple of decades, then that needs to be corrected. I just have one question though. The land that you talk, the Jagger Road, which is the old extension of that old road, that it's council property, I guess, this time.
As I understand it, yes.
Yeah, yeah. How does that square with the issue that there is a claim that therefore, I mean, in most of our roads, we developers build a road, build footpaths, stormwater, etc. Then they hand it over to the council to then take ownership of it and maintain it. How is that different here, in the sense that it prevents council from making those car parks available?
I think very fair question. Very distinct difference in the process of the example that you provide, and that is for the division of land, none of which is in direct relationship to land use. That is about the division of land, and there are specific and separate provisions to deal with that process and the handing over of land for public purposes, which may be a road with improvements, it may be reserve with improvements and the like. However, council in this instance was complicit in as it appears, and beg my pardon if I have the history incorrect from the limited amount of evidence that I've been able to get at this stage. I will stand corrected, but it would appear that the council had no interest in the land and began the negotiations to sell it. In fact, the council got a valuation. And I think the price was $175,000, fairly princely sum back in the late 80s, piece of land. But nevertheless, it is a very different process, because this is all about an approval or approvals, multiple, that make specific reference to works undertaken and the approval that extends over that land for land use purposes. So it differs fundamentally from a planning, I'll say, use the term planning law point of view. I am not a lawyer, I'm a town planner, but my experience with the planning law suggests that they are two very, very different propositions.
Thank you. We have hit our 10 minutes, so we'll need to seek leave of the meeting if we want to continue to ask questions. So I'll need a show of hands in favour of continuing. Yep, beautiful. Councillor Glasbrook.
I imagine this will be very short. So the approval that was given for the use of that land, council land, that would have included the restaurant?
There are various approvals. Some included restaurant, some included just units. The original, bear with me. Sorry, not the original. The original was 1988. I think, if I'm reading, beg your pardon. There is one here, 1987, which was for the serviced holiday apartments. And there are a number of conditions that relate to the driveway and the car parking area.
So were there some in the future that did relate to the restaurant? for use
Yes,
of that
yeah,
land?
yeah, I'm sure,
Yeah.
I'm sure there was.
So that land is tied to the restaurant and the apartments.
Sorry, say that last
That
thing.
land is tied to the restaurant and the apartments, the use of that land, the car park?
The apartments, not the restaurant.
not the restaurant at all.
That's right.
Okay.
Sorry, can I correct myself? There are some ties from a tenure perspective by way of rights of way between the restaurant and other facilities at the lower level and Jagger Road. So that's a tie, if you like.
Not explicitly for parking.
Not explicit in the parking as such, however, it may well have been created to afford access to Jagger Road for parking purposes, but I'm again, and this is why we plead to get all of the information so that we can nail down those questions. We can be definitive about whether there was any tie between these car parking spaces and the restaurant. I'm suggesting from the evidence that I have at the moment that this relates to the residential component, and that there may well be some other association of the restaurant to those which are at near sea level in front, if that makes sense. But I just repeat, it clearly needs proper interrogation to understand and know that history and assure everybody as to what rights exist and what the capacity of the authority is to deal with the land.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Tonkin. Just for clarity, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in essence the view of your clients that for relating to the car parks behind the units, for council not to make them timed car parks?
Two things, I think. And number one, not to make them time car parks, but more fundamental, as I stated to begin with, that there needs to be an understanding that those car parks are inextricably tied to the units by virtue of the earlier consents, rightly or wrongly. But if you were to make an application today for those apartments, you'd have an expectation for car parking of about the numbers that are there at the moment. If you cut that off, if you limit it to 2 or 3 hour car parkings, then what are the tourists, the visitors going to do? You know, they'll often come down as 2 car arrivals. They'll, you know, someone will come down, mum or dad will come down with some kids or by themselves, and then the partner will join them and they'll have 2 cars. There are enough units there to create a demand that utilises this to a significant extent. And it's fair to say that those apartments have a fairly healthy occupation rate. So to do that would be a real problem for the users and for the operators from a commercial viability perspective.
Just a very quick supplementary question. Are your clients opposed to time limit changes for the car parks in front of Whalers?
I think their interests lie at the rear.
Are there any further questions from elected members? If not, thank you, Mr. Tonkin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, there is an agenda item at 10.1 that relates to this matter. We do only have one question from the gallery and outstanding resolutions between this and that. But if you would like it to be brought forward, I would seek that, Councillor Robertson, you'd like to see if we can seek leave for that. So seek leave from the meeting to bring it forward. Again, show of hands, we'll need 2/3. Thank you. We will move to 10.1 and then return to agenda item 7 after that. So 10.1 is the time limited street parking Whalers restaurant public consultation. There are 4 recommendations there. I'll be guided by you as to how you'd like to move. Councillor Robertson. Microphone. Please use your microphone, Councillor Robertson, but absolutely you can
Yeah,
adjourn the
what
whole
it-
item.
I think the best thing to do with this, with this item would be to adjourn it. The reason for that is that, I think there's been very significant, very significant proposal has been received that is, effectively, torpedoing what's
Yeah.
in here. And, there's a lot of, documentation that's required to be passed and some serious, deliberations to be made.
Councillor Glasbrook.
If Councillor Robinson is going to move a
Adjournment motion. it's a
formal motion, there's no,
Correct. He does have to give a reason as to why the adjournment
Okay.
is sought, though, which is why I did allow him to continue on to get his stated reason for the adjournment. He does also need to clarify when he would like it adjourned to. So if you are moving a formal motion to adjourn item 10.1, Councillor Robertson, when would you like it brought back?
I think, and Deputy Mayor, I think it would be a bit premature to expect it to come to the June meeting. I think it should be by July.
Okay. So that it be brought back by the July meeting. Correct. Councillor Lidley, are you seconding that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. It's a formal motion to adjourn this entire item to be brought back to council at latest by the July council meeting. Motion, so I'll seek all those in favour. Those against, that motion is carried. Item 10.1 is adjourned. We return to item 7, which is questions from the gallery. There is one question from the gallery. Mr. Charles, I invite you forward. You're well aware of the procedure here. I'll invite you to read your question out as it was emailed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hales. Good to see you there in the chair this evening, doing an excellent job. All elected members have received this email as well, but I'm going to read it for the sake of the gallery and those watching on live stream. Confident that all elected members are aware of the safety issues raised by Team Victor through the cameras of South Coast Television on South Coast Media relating to the causeways railing with the potential of a child falling through the large gap in that railing. It's unlikely Council is not aware, or Council is not already aware, the concern has been echoed by a vast number of community members on social media sites. For those who have had toddlers or young children in their care, you would be aware that they have no concept of danger or fear. It only takes a split second of distraction to find your toddler or child has wandered off or disappeared. Team Victor believe Council should be concerned with this issue and by way of a motion, raise these concerns with the new Minister. Team Victor raises the issue with Council as we believe we all share a duty of care. The Australian standards state that a gap of 125 millimetres is required so as to stop any individual passing between the rails. All that is required is stainless steel cable to be inserted to regulation through the verticals of the existing structure. I should say that this is not going to change the heritage look of the building of the structure at all. It's still going to look as a duplication or a copy or a modern copy of what we had before. During the last council term in 2015, it took the unfortunate drowning of 3 men in a rip at Petrel Cove and a coroner's inquest before warning signs were erected at the beach. Surely Council should be concerned with the safety of those estimated 700,000 people the island and the tram attract and use the causeway yearly. My question is, will it take the falling and possible drowning of a toddler or child to take action, or will Council take preventative action by raising the issue formally with the new elected Minister? Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. I do think that there was probably a better way of asking the same question in regards to the phrasing and the words you've used. However, the response to your question is that the compliance of the causeway design and construction, including the rails, are the ongoing safety of and the ongoing safety of the causeway are the responsibility of the Department for Infrastructure and Transport. Following similar questions to the gallery in this chamber in January 2022, the matter was referred to the Department for Infrastructure and Transport at that time. The Department for Infrastructure and Transport confirmed that the causeway has been constructed to relevant Australian standards, bridge code. We understand that the current Minister for Infrastructure and Transport is already aware of these concerns, as similar questions have been raised directly with the Minister's office. In response, the Department for Infrastructure and Transport project team has prepared a ministerial briefing paper confirming that the design of the causeway is in accordance with the bridge code. Thank you, Mr. Charles.
Thank you very much. That's excellent news. And it was new to me. So there you go. I do believe we do have a duty of care regardless of who owns the structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. We move on to agenda item 8 is petitions. There being none, we will move on to 9, which is the Office of the Chief Executive Officer, and 9.1, outstanding resolutions, April 2. There is the recommendation that we receive and note the report. Anderson moving that way and Councillor Lidley seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? We have already dealt with item 10.1, which takes us to 10.2, which is the 2022 Victor Harbour Rock and Roll Festival. There are 2 recommendations in front of us. I'll be guided by the chamber how you wish to handle those. Councillor Robertson? Are you moving recommendation 1 and 2? Just 1? Thank you. Councillor Mann seconding that. Thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that? No worries. Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to recommendation number 2. Someone like to move that? Councillor Henderson moving that. Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak? No? Schofield.
Has always been an excellent event, and I know that there will be a few little hiccups, but we seem to have had a lot of hiccups in the last couple of years, and I think it should be supported and try to have that continuity with this particular event that we are well known for.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do any other elected members have discussion for this item? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, a couple of questions first, if I might, Deputy Mayor. First question is the current, it says here on the third paragraph from the top of the page, that the festival, Rock and Roll Festival, is placing significant pressure on the current staff of 0.6. This is the current allocation for the, I think it's Evans, is it? The Susan Evans, the council's events coordinator.
Festival Events Officer, yep.
So how much staff input is there to the Rock and Roll Festival?
Okay, I'll direct that one to Director Pathouse.
Yeah, through the Mayor, Deputy Mayor rather. Thanks, Councillor Robertson. The Rock and Roll Festival's one of the few events that Council coordinates entirely and retains responsibility for the coordination through the Historic Motor Vehicle Club in terms of some of the vehicle aspects, but all the organisation of the event in its entirety is all coordinated through Council staff. So it is an enormous amount of work, and we're struggling with the level of resource that we have at the moment. Things including the absence and maternity leave of our regular or usual festivals and events officer. So to deliver this event across a full 2-day period would see that entire resource fully sort of deployed into that space almost from here on through to the event. So, and that would be at the expense of a number of other things that council's currently doing in terms of the supporting of and the facilitation of other events such as those that are coming up, I think, in the next report through the grants sponsorship program.
Thank you, Director Padhouse. Councillor Robertson.
The other question on this was down the second bottom paragraph here, which was in the commentary. Oh, hang on, no, sorry, it was the third bottom paragraph, that the workshop, this was a previous workshop in council, the council focuses its efforts on event and festival facilitation rather than on their direct management and delivery. And I thought this principle had been put in place. If we couldn't find an organisation that was willing, such as the Historic Motor Vehicles Club, to be able to take on the organisation of and delivery of the festival, we shouldn't do it, because in this case we would be definitely providing some financial assistance to, for instance, the Historic Motor Vehicles Club, but our staff would not be focused on this. Our staff would be focused on getting events and festivals coming to Victor Harbor, making it as easy as possible for events to register and be given the right permissions, etc., which I believe we're still struggling with.
So Councillor Robertson, is this debate or is this a question?
The question here is that are we here having some problems in being confused by, on the one hand, wanting to have staff put on this festival, and on the other hand, trying to get private enterprise or local organisations to take on the festival? Because my understanding is that we were getting out of the business of the day-to-day running of events.
Yeah. Director Padhouse.
Yeah, through the Deputy Mayor, I'm not entirely clear on the question, but hopefully this will answer it. Yes, we're having difficulty resourcing the event, and yes, we've had difficulty trying to secure a third party to deliver the event for council as an event organiser, such as the Historic Motor Vehicle Club. And you're also correct in that there was some effort that council made as a result of the sponsorship program to try to redirect or to direct funds more into the facilitation of events and festivals, try to get better bang for its buck so others could come in and deliver things, such as the Red Hot Summer Series concert that was on a few weeks back, and more events like that. So yes, there's been a conscious effort to try to do that sort of thing. In amongst all of that, for whatever reason, the Rock and Roll Festival has remained in council's budget and business plans over the last couple of years. I'd suggest that a reason for that is probably because it's been cancelled the last 2 years because of COVID issues. So it hasn't sort of perhaps drawn as much attention as it is now as we start to try to prepare for the next one.
Thank you, Director Padhouse. Councillor Robertson.
Then my comment on this was that if we haven't got an organiser for the Rock and Roll Festival, notwithstanding the fact that yes, it is something that a portion of the Victor Harbor population looks forward to having each year, that we don't engage in providing this budget for this event, because we haven't. If there's no one stepping forward to take it on, then why are we doing it?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Glasbrook.
Well, I'd like to speak in favour of the Rock and Roll Festival. I think the reason that it's still on here now is that in the past it has been very successful, and I certainly thought that it had been generating regular visitation from interstate, people coming and staying for at least one night, if not more. So I actually thought it was quite a successful event, unless I've got that wrong, but I don't believe that I have. Personally, I wonder why we are searching for more events like this next item if we can't manage one that we know is successful or has been successful. So maybe rather than can this one, we should potentially can one that we don't know is going to be successful, because if we leave it for another year, it'll be gone. It's my opinion. I know I went recently over to Yankalilla. They had a car show thing over there. There's our neighbours and other councils in the state are trying to steal these types of things away, and if we let it go, well, we'll have lost it, in my opinion. So I don't know. I was disappointed that it was only going to be one day. I think that will affect the visitation. Certainly will affect the money spent. I'm not sure that people will probably come from interstate. So I don't know. I was disappointed, I have to say, and I would like to support it. And I think if we can't afford to support this, maybe we should not consider some of the ones in the next item and perhaps support this one, support one that we know that's successful, and maybe give us another year to find someone who might want to take it on. The car club do a huge amount of work now in relation to this event. They didn't want to manage the whole event, but they did. I thought did a great job. But anyway, I will support this, but I would like to see it personally. I'd like to see it go back to 2 days, but it's just me.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Lidley.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Councillor Glasbrook on this one. I'd like to see it go 2 days. I think it's a really important event for our region. The timing of the event is very good, particularly with the return of things with the new state government, the return of motorsport in South Australia to streets. This ties directly in with that, and they'll be ramping up to get the car clubs and that enthusiasm around motorsport and motoring events and that around that festival that is the Motorsport Festival in Adelaide. So I think it has great potential to be a really strong event as well. We all know rock and roll and car clubs go hand in hand. That's why it's worked down here when we have been able to hold it without restrictions of COVID and weather impacts and the like. But I'd love to see it go 2 days.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the fellow views. I think I probably align more with some of those expressed by Councillor Robertson. I think I do agree it is an important event, and I think it caters for a large variety of our residents and also tourists who come down here. I think, though, it does come to a question of resources and what we want to sow our resources into. This has been an event that's gone on for a number of years that, as we've found, and as again we've been reminded tonight, it does take up a lot of our staff resources that could be spent otherwhere around event attraction. I think that I'm happy to support this. However, I think it is something in the future we need to look at if there's not someone else who can come in and run it, where the council keeps supporting this kind of event, because I disagree with some of the statements about not attracting other events. I think Victor's got a long way to go in attracting events for a younger demographic. I think the Red Hot Summer concert was a great example of that. And although I only knew about 8 songs, it was definitely getting down the list of catering for a younger demographic. So I think I'd certainly want our resources to be going into attracting high profile events that don't necessarily cost council lots in resources, maybe a bit more in kind and donations, but have big attractions for young people, middle age, a demographic that's, I think, Victor hasn't in the past, or since I've been alive, catered very well for. But I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Deputy Hales. Just a question for Claire Knight-Stacey, I believe she's on screen. The $20,000 income that we project for this event, is that a true accurate record, or is just a part of the actual syllabus is about we invest $46,700 but we get $20,000 income, so it's $26,700 we invest in it. So do we actually make $20,000 on a 2-day event?
Group Manager Knight-Stacey.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor. So in terms of the figures for this year, I would need to check what the actuals year to date were, but it's reasonably close in terms of the budget because we review that each year. However, the report for you is basically changing the model and looking to offset $5,000 of income against that 20,000 expenditure. So that would be based on an estimate of what gained through the income of the new.
Yep, thank you. Because of leading on to that part of the equation, you know, we do 1 day event, cut it in half from 2 to 1 day, and we end up, you know, having less return on investment. We're only getting $5,000 back for 1 day, where we got $20,000 or $10,000 a day on a 2 day event. So to me, this is what I would not say is a great investment. I mean, if you're looking at financial aspects of it. Implications to run the event because of the upgrade of stage 4 of the Ocean Street and Albert Place. The impact of COVID is still around, and we're not quite sure what will be happening in September after we go through our winter period with flu and COVID. There is predictions saying that, you know, it would escalate. So I'm not quite sure if this is only, because this is only a trial for 1 day, see if it works. And has this event run its course now? And will it survive if we do support this? Will it survive, and do we put our energies into other areas? I do have a concern about impact on staff, considering what staff are going through at the moment with COVID-19 impacting on staff numbers, and to put this type of workload into the current staff, it is a bit of a problem. I think we could be looking at a better way of doing this. I'm not quite sure this is the right time to do it again. Do we defer it for another year and maybe lose the chance that we may lose it? It may disappear altogether. Sometimes these things do happen. It's like businesses sometimes, you know, they can survive so long, but eventually they fold because it's just not viable anymore. I'm just wondering whether this is it, because if organisations don't want to take it on, that must mean something. You know, that why aren't they taking it on? Maybe it's not profitable, maybe it's just not gets the returns you want. So I'm sort of in two minds as to what to do. Continue with the 1 day event to see the impacts, and then, you know, and return on money is very poor. I don't support that part of it. If we can work out some other ways, but yes, I just find that just doing it because we've done it for a long time, but then again, I just feel that I've got this gut feeling that it's just not going to work properly. It's just because of the impact of COVID and staffing issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Director Pat House has suggested that it's due to the capacity of both organisations, the council as well as the Historic Motor Vehicles Club, that this year a 1 day event is what is achievable in the time ahead of them. But it's either that or to not proceed with the event is some commentary around it. And the income estimate is deliberately conservative. Take that however you like. That would be everyone having spoken. Councillor Henderson, did you want to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hills. Yes, this has been a great event, and the last time it ran over 2 days, it was a huge event, very, very successful. I believe we have the capacity to hold this 1 day event plus all of the proposed events in the next item. The difference is, and it's been pointed out already, the difference is between this event and the subsequent events that we're going to look at is that council very much runs this event, so it takes staff resources. The other proposed events are run by other people, other organisations, with our facilitation and support. That's the big difference. But I believe we have the capacity to run this 1 day event, which has been very successful as a 2 day event in the past and has brought a lot of visitation to our city. I believe the 1 day event will still bring lots of people. A lot of people will still come, spend the whole day enjoying themselves and still stay at least 1 night, if not 2. So I think we have the capacity to do this.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. With that, debate is closed and we'll put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. We now move on to agenda item 3, which is the 2021-22 Festival and Events Sponsorship Program, round 2. We have 7 recommendations there. I think we'll start by just receiving and noting the report. Councillor Schofield, happy to move that way? Someone to second that? Councillor Henderson? Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I would like to speak to this on several levels. First of all, although this is the second round of the event sponsorship program for 21-22, the total amount of money on offer is around about $10,500. And to me, this is where we need drastic improvements to be able to attract festival and event programs down here, because the excuse me, the amounts given, roughly anything from $500 to a couple of $1,000 council contribution to those events, and most of that is in kind, so it's providing road closures and other important assistance. That this is not serious stuff, in the sense that with this sort of budget, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Now we're not had monkeys on this. The events put on by Henry Carter, for instance, are really excellent events. I'm wondering if you know, to the extent to which the grants covered actually do cover the kind of in-kind sponsorship required to run those events, because both the Viking Festival is getting much bigger as it goes on, and of course expect that the Fleur Spring Fair, which will be one of the only spring fair in South Australia, and will grow, particularly because it's the only one that's in a seaside setting, that it will grow as well, and demand for that in-kind contribution will be needed to be increased. But secondly, I think what we really, this is not a discussion about this is about the sponsorship program, but it touches on the issue that what we really need to be doing in terms of these events here. Again, I think that this should be something that's integral to the activities, for instance, of Business Victor Harbour. I also think that it's one where we really need to seriously address on these, some of these are going to be major projects. We really need to address the amount of red tape, and how long it takes us to give approvals, etc., for these programs. So on this particular one, yeah, and we're getting away on the cheap with the amounts we're making available as a sponsorship for these events. We can, good luck to us, but I don't think this is a way to go in terms of seriously attracting top events here.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. As always, I guess this report is about us looking at the outcomes from the event sponsorship program. I think your discussion relates more to how that, I guess, grant program is set up itself. And as an elected member, you are always capable of pursuing changes to that. Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Councillor Robertson with regards to the need to invest in more events and potentially increase the funds that we put towards these events. We really should be taking a forward step, but I think looking at the quality of the events that are listed out there, I think the comment of you pay peanuts, you get monkeys could be taken quite offensively by some of those people, particularly from my mind, the Heisen 105 Ultra Marathon. It's a fantastic event, and the fact that they're asking for a very little amount of money and they're happy with that to stage that event, which attracts a lot of people and a lot of overnight stays as well. I think we want to be open-minded and open-armed as we can to attract such events, and that kind of commentary isn't very helpful to attracting those events which give great value for money. But I do agree that we should be upping our festival and event sponsorship program if we can to attract great events to our town, because we have a great town to attract people to. And yeah, you're right. Henry Carter's shown in the last couple of years with the Viking Festival that he is quite a capable person. And if we can attract more people like him with more money, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Again, this report is about receiving and noting the outcomes of the sponsorship program and not about discussing the program itself. As an elected member, you also have the appropriate forums to deal with that. Are there any other elected members who would like to discuss receiving and noting this report? If not, put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, we have 6 items that are recommendations for sponsorship. One item that is a recommendation fine. The Chamber is how you would like to deal with these items. Councillor Robertson would like to move all 6 en bloc. Someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Henderson?
Just to say that for the benefit of my fellow elected members, if they haven't looked at the details of the applications, the money that we're proposing to grant to these organisations to run their events is pretty close to what they were asking for.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to make a quick comment, I think the total, if you look at the budget allocation for festival and events, is 114,500, which is a significant amount, and we're currently going through our budget process at the moment. And so if we're wanting to increase this amount, we can always do that, and we should keep that in mind to attract those bigger events.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Schofield?
Thank you. Yes, look, I support this, and of course I was on the panel. I also agree with Councillor Little's response in paying peanuts, you get monkeys. Henry Carter has actually came to council a couple of years ago. He received a good grant. His aim is not to come back to council. He wants to be able to run these events eventually without any council support, hence the amount of money that he's actually asked for. And as Councillor Henderson said, these are the guidelines, these are the applications that came in. It's the amount of money that the people actually asked for. And if they're happy to run an event with $500 and a road closure, and that's what their application is, then that's what they received.
Schofield, is there any other elected members that would like to have comment on this? If not, Councillor Robertson, did you want to close debate? No. No worries, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. We move on to item 10.4. That, yep. 22 NAIDOC Week grant funding application. The first recommendation is that we receive a note. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Lilly moving and Councillor Henderson seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Anyone like to speak to that?
Deputy Mayor, I think in the, I know this is not the, this is the report, but this is not the, we're not on to recommendation 2 yet, but I think there should be, that the council should be approving of $10,000 in cash and $5,000 in kind in the first second recommendation, because that's what's being delivered. That's what was asked for.
I've just made the first recommendation though.
Yeah.
But only the first.
We will clarify that by the time we get to it. Yep. And we'll keep it to receiving and noting the report at this time. Discussion on that one? Okay, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We now look at recommendation 2. Whoop. That was me. Alright.
Through the Deputy Mayor, I just draw your attention to, on page 52, the standalone sentence just above the heading of budgetary provision. It says this report recommends that council provides $10,000 in the form of a cash grant incorporating the in-kind related expenses. Doesn't mean that council can't move alternatively to that, but just to clarify that.
So Councillor Robertson, if you would like it to be the 10,000. Okay, cool. All good. Councillor Mann, you would like to move that, and Councillor Littley seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Mann.
Just quickly, I think noting also that sentence above that last one that was quoted states around how that in-kind support was calculated to be less than $1,000 instead of, I think they have initially asked for the 5,000, but less than been incorporated. So I'm happy to, as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Littley, did you want to speak to this one? No. Would any other elected members like to speak? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. NIDOC Week is a really important event, and whatever the MEPAC is proposing is worth supporting. That's for sure. However, this is an event which is going over 4 hours essentially, and on one day. And yeah, well, I mean, it's all up to people's capacity to put things on. But to me, I was hoping to have read that the event would have been bigger than this. I noticed also in here that the part of the cost of this, the food was being provided by the Rotary Club, I believe, and this was down here as being a few $100. I presume that the catering was, sorry, $1,500. I wondered if that was going to be catering such as sausage sizzle where people could just line up and they'd get free, or were they're going to charge for those?
Through the Deputy Mayor, if I could respond to that, Councillor Robinson. So NAIDOC is an event that the First Nations Ngarrindjeri people are organising themselves. This is a council support of that. It's often recommended through our First Nations people that NAIDOC is an event that they organise and manage in the way that they see fit, whereas reconciliation events are something that council staff manage. So some of this budget is actually already budgeted for, and so there is no extra cost involved with this. And so the Rotary Club have put forward their need to support NAIDOC in this way as well, as part of a donation towards that as well, I think, Councillor Robertson. So there's no extra cost to the people attending.
Is there any further commentary? If not, Councillor Mann, would you like to close debate? No. That being the case, all those in favour? Thank you. We now move on to item 10.5, which is the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan, Draft 2022 Action Plan. The recommendation before us is that we receive a note. And Councillor Henderson moving that way, Councillor Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Would anyone like to speak to this? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hales. Just I guess, bit of somewhere here along the lines of a couple of questions. Don't seem to find them. I do apologise to the chamber for this. There's only just some minor issues about the measurable targets that we have in the plan, and I think they're great targets and the strategies are great. Just wondering whether we could expand on some of the commentary just to give a bit more information about the measurable targets and how we're achieving them, just so we have a bit more information, that's all. But apart from that, it's a minor issue, but I just thought it'd be nice to have that little bit extra commentary. But, you know, it's pretty basic in that term. Thank you.
Through the Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to provide that extra detail, Councillor Kemp.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 11, corporate and customer. There being no report. We go on to agenda heading 12, environment and infrastructure services, and 12.1, which is request to name a road or public place, lot 507 Central Drive. There are two recommendations, ones that we receive and note. Someone like to move that one? Councillor Henderson moving that way and Councillor Robertson seconding. Would either of you like to discuss that? No? Would any members like to discuss that? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That leaves the second recommendation voted by the chamber. Like to deal with that? Councillor Robertson, move that way. No worries. Someone like to second that? Councillor Schofield seconding that. Would either of you like to talk to the motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Councillor Hales, I agree with the that this request be turned down.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Schofield, did you want to say anything?
Very difficult, but yes, look, I agree with the recommendation as it is complying with the recommendations and also information that this particular committee provides.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, I sort of, when I've read this and looked at it, and I have heard of this gentleman, and I've had some dealings with him occasionally in the early years of the Franklin Island aspects. He is well known in the area. He's a local identity. I am wondering whether, you know, how does the people who work for their community are not recognised, you know, unless they meet certain criteria in the policy. I'm just wondering whether his name could go on the register for future, and also give opportunity for the people who've submitted his name to do further research to find out what other interests he had in the community and whether he served the community in various, not just the Franklin Island precinct, but the other area of it, also the community as a whole. So I'm just wondering that, you know, criteria around the policy really limits community people to be recognised. I think that maybe needs a review, but that's not what we're here tonight for. But so I'm not supporting this motion because I think there's an opportunity. We need to revisit it to look at the opportunity to look at where, you know, people can get recognised for their work and commitment to their local community, not for the community as a whole for Victor Hub, but he may have done, we don't know that. So I'm just wondering whether we could, I could do an amendment that that his name is placed on the nomenclature register future reference.
I'm not sure that an amendment would be the appropriate way to go about that, but you could move a third
Well, I
motion
could do that, yes.
suggesting that. I
Yeah.
think the motion needs to stay as to whether or not their request as formally lodged is supported or not. But then we could add further.
So I'll put on notice that I'll move a third motion to have his name included in the register.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Is there any further, Councillor Glasbrook?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say something along the same lines. We have so many parks and things named after people in the community. How is it that they've been able to be named? I'm not sure whether all of those people would have been on that list. Is there anyone else able to answer that question?
Director Hayter would like to.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor. Yes, so they are gazetted under the nomenclature policy, and they've essentially gone through the Heritage Advisory Group to get on that policy. So there's a long list of names that have been suggested to the Heritage Advisory Group, and they have documented those. So unfortunately, Mr. Booth isn't one of those that has been recognised at this point.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't mind betting that there's been quite a few people in the past that have been honoured with a naming of something without being on that list. I'd almost guarantee it. So anyway, I'm happy to accept this recommendation at the moment, but I encourage, as Councillor Kemp said, I encourage the local people down there to do some more homework and let us know, because I personally don't know this person. That doesn't mean that he hasn't done a great job in his local community down there. So I would like to receive more information and perhaps reconsider this at another date. That'd be the way I'd like this to be progressed.
I guess a question out of the commentary from both Councillors Kemp and Glasbrook would be, does the unsuccessful application this time preclude them from applying again for the same lot and the same request, but with further information? Correct.
Sorry, through the chair, there's nothing in the policy that I can see that would prevent them from resubmitting if they come up with additional information.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, question?
Yes, I do have a question, Deputy Mayor. When was Mr. Booth's name presented to the Heritage Advisory Group to see if he met the criteria or not?
Sorry, through the chair. No, it hasn't been presented to the Heritage Advisory Group. There is a long-standing list, so it doesn't go through the Heritage Advisory Group. The Heritage Advisory Group have endorsed this nomenclature list, and then, sorry, anything that comes forward as a suggestion from community is then looked at against that list and against the policy that it forms part of. So this recommendation is based on the policy attached to that list. So this is endorsed by council, having been advised by the Heritage Advisory Group of names that should be considered.
Thank you. And so the application goes through to your department, you know, for looking at this to see whether the name is suitable. Who makes the assessment? What I'm trying to gather.
Yes, so on this particular occasion, it came through to our department under the policy. It would go to the CEO and then to the chamber for consideration.
And just another question, if I may, on the park bench and the that hasn't been included in this aspect of whether the council would support a bench and a grass plaque be placed in the reserve. It's just a blanket recommendation saying not supporting anything towards Mr. Carl Booth.
Through the chair, so there is another policy around donating that park furniture. So if the applicants, and I understand they're going to do some community fundraising, it would seem would comply with that park furniture, so that it isn't about that. This is specifically for the chamber to make a decision about the renaming of a park or an open space.
just a question in relation to procedure. Would the appropriate procedure be then for Councillor Kemp to move a motion that this be recommended to the Heritage Advisory Committee for consideration, for them to consider the heritage aspects, or not?
As in recommendation to be adjourned in order for it to go there, or?
No, I'm happy to vote against it now, as I've said.
Okay, yeah.
Then to go,
the next-
to
For
progress,
part 3 to be
to
that the
progress
name be
it,
put
would
forward.
that be the process to send it to the Heritage Committee for consideration?
I would imagine so. That, yeah, Mr. Calbu's name be put forward for consideration to addition to the register. So forth. Yeah. Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, I'm supporting the motion as it stands. I'll be voting that way. I have heard of Mr. Calbu's, and I believe I've even had some correspondence with him at times, and I have no doubt at all with his recommendation, or this recommendation coming to us, or this approach coming to us, that he was a very valued member of that very localised community, and sounds like a real character and someone who would be befitting of having a park named after him. The process, though, is such that there's a lot of people out there who would think that they're befitting of a park named after them, or their communities would think. If they are adamant that this man should be recognised in that way, then keep following the process. Work to put that forward. Yes, we can make a motion to say that we can recommend it forward, and that might be the right thing to do. That might be what the chamber decides tonight if we do a third motion. But encourage this community to, or this group of people, to seek out the Heritage Advisory Committee and make the Heritage Advisory Committee doesn't know what they don't know. They don't know the community work Mr. Calbus has done in this very localised community. So it would be grand if we had a group of people going to our Heritage Advisory Committee, telling them about the new heritage that we have, and a 20-year, 30-year commitment from a person to an area. That would be great. It would also support our Heritage Advisory Committee and the work that they do in recognising new people to our community who make a valued contribution. So the process is there and it does work. People need to make it work, I feel. So either way, I'm supportive of everything that people are saying, but I'm not supportive of just doing it. It needs to be that way, otherwise we'd have parks named everywhere.
Okay. Councillors Mann and Henderson, you haven't spoken to this yet. Do you wish to? Councillor
Sorry,
Mann.
just very quickly. I think there's a bit of a question around the process, because I think there may be some confusion around how names get on the nomenclature register, and whether that's something that is taken in intake or review of every year or every few years, because I'm sure in past it doesn't come to council first and then us recommend to a committee to then potentially come back up again. So I guess it's more around the process of, I don't know, I don't think there's a need for a third recommendation, but whether it's just saying, here's the process, here's when the applications are, this is how you go about it.
Yes, Councillor Mann, you're correct in terms of there is absolutely a process we could go through without a third motion, that the Heritage Advisory Group can consider the information put forward in this application, and then bring it back to us. Director Rokaczynski has drafted something that more or less says the same thing if we did want to proceed with a third motion, but it isn't necessary because the Heritage Advisory Group can proceed on it without. So that brings us to the motion in front of us. Councillor Henderson, you didn't want to speak to it, which means Councillor Robertson, as the mover, would you like to close debate?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. There's been some good points made all around on the process. And I noticed here that the people who put forward this application did it in a correct way. They used a current Victor Harbour form and would have been surely assumed that that's all they needed to do, was to put this forward. Yeah, so I think that there's, in summary out of this, it's that we should not send a signal that this was not done properly, because people that put this forward did do it properly. We might not agree that straight away that the reserve and the other items that Councillor Kemp spoke about, the seating and the plaque, etc. That the reserve be named as such, for Carl Booth, but that we don't slam the door shut on it. There be either a way in which we as a council pass that very proper covering letter and application onto the Heritage Advisory Group, if that's the path it should flow. And that I think it would be useful to have the to have item 2 voted on. So I expect it wouldn't pass, but that we definitely add an item 3 that, dare I say it, maybe it's an administrative issue that they have brought it straight to council rather than routing it through the Heritage Advisory Committee. But whatever, we just need to fix it up and get it listed.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson, for closing debate. I will put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. Now we can look towards a third motion if someone would like to move that way. In no way was this saying that the process they went through incorrect, though. It's saying that there is also a concurrent process that it existed alongside it that the applicant didn't know about. So it's not a decline in regards to they didn't follow the right process. It's just that there was another process. So maybe in the future we can look at how those two interact with one another. Councillor Kemp, you would like to move a third?
Yes, I think, thank you, Deputy Mayor Howes. I think it's along the lines of my third motion is more or less changed it slightly in my mind, that the council writes back to the applicant saying they can resubmit Mr. Carl Booth's name to be on the nomenclature register, and also to provide additional information to support their application, and maybe provide some background of the policy to them so they know exactly what they have to look for. And that they can resubmit Mr. Carl Booth's name, register, please provide additional information.
Totally understand where you're coming from, Councillor Kemp. Do you not believe that that would be the information provided to them otherwise?
Well,
I'm
that's what I'm clarifying.
As the chair of the meeting, do you think that this motion is necessary for that to happen?
Well, if you can confirm from me, Deputy Mayor, that
that will happen,
that will happen.
Then we won't need a motion.
That the council will write back to the applicant outlining reasons why it was back and what to do in future to do that. Now that's got to happen. That never came out in the conversation.
Totally.
So I'm assuming that if that does happen, this motion most probably is not necessary.
Director Hayter.
Thank you, through the chair. So just to clarify, we wouldn't normally, because under the policy, it says in terms of name selection, a road or public place name must be selected from council's nomenclature register as detailed, and then there's a long list of names. So names should be selected from the list so as to be appropriate to the physical, historical or cultural character of the areas concerned. So in other words, this has already gone through, the register has already gone through the Heritage Advisory Committee. Council has adopted that as part of the policy, and so what has happened, the proponents have applied for Mr. Carl Booth. He isn't currently part of our endorsed register or the policy that sits within it. However, it is the Heritage Advisory Group that provides advice on what road and public names will be included on the register. So in answer to your question, no, we wouldn't automatically give this name to the Heritage Advisory Committee for consideration, because we have an endorsed policy from council, but council can ask us to put this suggestion forward for consideration and to amend the policy and the register, or sorry, to amend the register that goes with the policy.
Thank you, Director Hayter. I guess the question was, will the applicant, as a result of this evening's discussion, be given the option of how to go forward, or do you require a motion?
Currently, that's what we would be doing. Essentially, would be going outside of the policy.
Okay.
But if the suggestion is that council that the administration works with the proponent to get Mr. Booth's name to the Heritage Advisory Committee, that comes back to council consideration, because we have to change. You have to endorse Mr. Booth's name being entered on the nomenclature register, which it currently isn't. So if we were to put a recommendation any other way, it would be against what council has already endorsed. So yes, it would be good to hear from you that you want us to pursue this via the Heritage Advisory
Go forward with the
Group.
motion then.
Yeah, I'll continue with the motion.
Yeah.
That the council writes back to the applicant notifying them that they can resubmit Mr. Carl Booth's name to the nomenclature register and to provide further supporting evidence.
Would it be submit Mr. Calbu's name to the Heritage Advisory Group for inclusion on the nomenclature register and to, for consideration to be for inclusion to the nomenclature register?
Yeah.
And provide further support?
Yeah, I think thank you for articulating that. Yeah, I think also what this will open up now is more people to actually put applications in on community members who they believe have done a fantastic job for their community. Whether they get on there or not is another matter, but the fact is that we need to give these people more opportunity, and maybe the policy when it gets reviewed will maybe change slightly.
Okay. Just get that sorted up on the board. Would someone like to second that, knowing the intent of Councillor Kemp, Councillor Robertson doing so? Councillor Robertson, did you want to speak to that motion? No? Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to the motion? No? If not, we'll just wait to make sure that it is all correct before we vote on it. Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson, after the Brains Trust have spoken about how the motion can work and get the outcome that you're seeking, there's advice that we go something worded slightly different but gets the same outcome, and that's that council administration advice from the Heritage Advisory Group to investigate on the nomenclature list and to make a recommendation to council for something further consideration. For their consideration. Is that suitable to you?
Yeah, it doesn't actually
Once it
achieve
is.
the applicant being notified and actually submitting with further information to support their by Mr. Carl Booth should name go on the register. So I guess that's basically what I'm saying, that they should have an opportunity to resubmit and provide additional support that resubmit. The second motion doesn't cover that.
Yeah, we could change that then, that council writes back to the applicant seeking further information about Mr. Oops, just lost it. Mr. Booth to enable the Heritage Advisory Committee to be forwarded to the Heritage Advisory Committee for consideration, and so on.
Councillor Kemp. Have you read number 3 as it stands now? The council writes back to the applicant seeking further information to enable the Heritage Advisory Committee to consider including Mr. Boo's name on the nomenclature list.
So with that motion as it's written, to me it says that the current application still stands.
But we've already written.
But we've not supported the request. So, as was just said to me, this motion takes the information from the application, and it's about an application for his name to be added to the nomenclature list, which affects his name being used in the City of Victor Harbor ongoing in the future. It's not just about the specific reserve, because in recommendation 2 or motion 2, we've dealt with that in that regard. I'll just tell Councillor Kemp that.
Through the chair. So council has resolved at this stage not to jump ahead and name a reserve after Mr. Booth. The likely reason being there's a whole lot of names on the nomenclature list which have been considered by the Heritage Advisory Committee and endorsed by council. So it's more about reordering it. The step here is to first have the Heritage Advisory Committee consider the suitability of adding Mr. Booz's name to that nomenclature list. They would then recommend it being added. Council would then, at some point, make a decision as to whether to endorse the names on the nomenclature list, at which point, if an application was made to use Mr. Booz's name to name anything that fell within the policy, it would then be a suitable option. So it's about having the full consideration of the suitability of the name at this point.
Through the chair, just adding that their assessment will be against council's endorsed policy, which says the name must be on the nomenclature list, so they need to determine if that, and must be a name that is of local significance, not a living person, relevant to one or more of the following themes: Aboriginal names, early explorers, pioneers and settlers, eminent persons, local history, thematic names such as flora, fauna, ships, war casualty lists or commemorative names.
Where's that sit with you, Councillor Kemp?
Look, I guess it's about giving the opportunity for the applicant to provide the additional information for consideration. they're considering once they get notified what they have to meet for that reason. And so if that motion does that,
This motion does that.
then that's fine. As long as the applicant understands the process, then I think it's up to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Robertson, you are also happy with the motion as it stands? Thank you. Dare I ask, would any other members like to discuss this? Councillor Schofield.
My apologies, but I can understand why they've actually asked for this. But the more I look at the policy, we're actually asking to go against our own policy. So if we were wanting to do something, wouldn't it be more prudent to look at our policy, change our policy, then put a motion up like this? Because if you're sitting on the Heritage Advisory Committee and you're taking in the regulations of your policy, and I've sat on that committee, it's against what we're actually asking, to me, is against the policy that we've already approved and endorsed.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. I don't think that we're not making a recommendation. We're just telling the applicant how they can go about seeking the outcome they desire, and whether they can gather together further information which would help Mr. Calboo's reach one of the eminent person or local history or meet the policy that is in place. However, if it doesn't sit comfortably, you know how you can deal with that when the motion's put. Councillor Lidley.
Yeah, I won't be supporting this. I feel that we've actually had a discussion like this some couple of years ago about who goes on what names and how names get onto the list. I feel that if the people that have proposed this the naming of this, it's quite admirable. I feel if they feel that strongly about it, they will go through the process, and they will continue to go through the process. They'll investigate what the process is, and they'll follow that process, and they'll resubmit until such time as they get the desired outcome that they want. If that desired outcome is a plaque on a bench in the park, if that satisfies their need to recognise this person, well, that'll be a great outcome. I don't think we need to go back to each and every person that is unsuccessful in this process. It's about naming our streets and naming our reserves, and that shouldn't be taken as a let's do it. There's a process, and for 100 years we've gone through a similar process, or the process of the day, to name those streets after the people that we want to name them after.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Kemp, you move the motion. Would you like to close?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This motion really is only about a process of getting a name on the register through a process of the Heritage Advisory Committee looking at it with further additional information to see if it warrants to be recommended to go on the register. That's all the motion's about, is giving the people another opportunity, another resubmission, as Councillor Lidley has said. So it's just really notifying them. And I think it's a courtesy from council to notify them that this is a situation. It's not like we get many of these types of applicants on a given day, because we don't seem to come to us very often. But I think that, you know, it's an opportunity, and this is how we get onto this. So we are within policy, because we're actually telling the community that if you want to get a name on the register, this is what you do. So that's all we're doing. So I think that how else can it happen? So I believe that this is just another opportunity for the community to have a go at it and submit applicants if they meet the criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. With that, debate is closed. We're voting on The motion number 3, all those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you for the robust debate, members. Which is signalised intersection with associated pedestrian crossings at the intersection of Adelaide Road and McCracken Drive. There are 2 recommendations there. Guided by you as how you'd like to deal with them. Councillor Henderson.
En bloc.
Moving the 2 together. Someone like to second that? Councillor Lidley. Would either of you like to speak to it? No? Councillor Glasbrook.
Well, I'm going to speak against it. I'm going to speak against the wording. It was the same as recently I voted against the roundabout idea at, what's it called, Wattle Drive. The last thing that I want to see Adelaide Road become and Hindmarsh Road is a whole heap of traffic lights and a whole heap of roundabouts, because it just slows everything down. To me, the issue with that area, McCracken up there from Coromandel Drive, Wattle Drive, is that they need another access point. Not that we need traffic lights and we need roundabouts and whatever else. And I've spoken to the CEO about this, and I'm sure she felt that I was quite stupid, but that's okay. We have 2 options. The first and the most simple one is Cudmore Road. Cudmore Road now goes down and basically stops. If you look on your phones on the map, you could put a bridge across Cudmore Road, across the river actually, and join on to Wagon Road. And then from Wagon Road, you can turn right and go onto the Ring Road. It's not far at all. Get around into Victor, Wagon Road, into the primary school and into all of these places, keeping people off of Adelaide Road, because that's what the problem is. There's too many cars. All of those people have to go onto Adelaide Road to get anywhere. To get to Adelaide, to get to Victor Harbour, to get to Port Elliot, they've got to go onto that road, and we need to reduce the traffic flow on that road. There is another option that I won't go into. It's more a long-term option and be quite expensive. We need to purchase quite a few hams and whatever else, but still a great opportunity, in my opinion, to give that area access to Victor Harbour without having to go onto Adelaide Road. We'll then solve.
I will bring you to the report and the actual content of the motion
that you want to put into the
motion is
strategic
actually,
plan.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree with those wording. I believe that we should put into our strategic plan.
The ideology behind what the project's about. Okay.
The project is about signalised traffic lights.
So we're talking about the project, which means we're not talking about expanding or a different idea that would compete with it. We're talking about this.
Well, I disagree with that idea, and I'm telling the elected members why. I don't think there's any problem with that.
Okay. I'm saying keep the content.
Well, the content is, I disagree with this. I don't believe that we should end up with traffic lights and roundabouts everywhere. We need to look at the core of the problem, and the core of the problem is there's too many people going on Adelaide Road, and there are 2 options where we can get all of those people out of there without coming onto Adelaide Road. They should be considered as part of. So if this motion is lost, I would just simply reword motion that we can holistically, we've been told so many times in this council to holistically look at Hindmarsh Road and Adelaide Road, look at the issues. I believe this is the answer. Speak.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm wondering if when I first read this agenda item, whether it was properly worded or not. I think that the recommendation 2, a signalised upgrade of the intersection, is what the problem here is, because the actual topic up in 12.2 is the signalised intersection with associated pedestrian crossings. I think that the purpose of this is not to be enabling traffic movement. My understanding was, because I think you brought this issue forward, was to provide pedestrian crossing access from Hayborough to Coles. for Bunnings. So this upgrade, at that time, I don't recall it being that the purpose of it was to put traffic signals on there. It would be to provide a pedestrian crossing, and signalized, that would mean, well, okay, it's got a go, no go based on when the button was pushed, etc. But so therefore it would have minimal impact on the traffic, because I certainly agree with Councillor Glasbrook that I'd hate to see Adelaide, Hindmarsh Road, the Welsh Road, the Ring Road being choked off with 60 and 80 km/h entries and exits. So is that the correct here, that this signalised upgrade of the intersection, which implies that the whole purpose of it is for cars? Isn't it, since this was your idea, question to you is was it your intent just to provide pedestrian crossing because you'd had some interactions with some mothers in Labourer who couldn't get across get to Coles and Bunnings?
In response to that, Councillor Robertson, absolutely. The intent of the original motion was around people movement, not traffic movement. But the motion before us is about taking the responses from and moving the project, I guess, onto the strategic project register, which is a process of meaning it's not happening now, but we might consider it in the future as a project option. But yes, the core of the question, it's about pedestrian movement.
Because for me, we need to make it clear that this signalised upgrade is a signalised pedestrian crossing and not because if you put in a traffic, signalised traffic arrangement there, automatically you will be required to put in a crossing as well. So I think there should be a signalised pedestrian upgrade, in which case I would vote for it. The way it sits now, to me, it's it's not worth voting on, because it cuts traffic. It's going to be operating signalised, will be operating 24 hours a day. It's going to be causing a greater traffic problem on Adelaide Road than we have already.
In response to that, Councillor Robertson, the wording in this motion is about the wording in the original motion, which it is all correct. Does it include the with associated pedestrian crossings? No, but the act of adding it to the register means that all the information that is already there, the motion, etc., should, and so therefore that stuff wouldn't be lost and it wouldn't just be a one-line signalised upgrade intersection. Is there any further discussion? Well, okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As this stands alone, it has some merit, but I think there's a bigger problem, the whole area, which should be on the strategic register for a complete review of people and traffic movement, not just one aspect of it. So I can't support it as it is written, but I certainly would support a third motion that actually looks at the bigger problem, holistically, more so than just a isolated intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camp. Is there any further discussion on this item? If not, Councillor Henderson, you're the mover.
I don't have a problem with the wording of this motion, and it's clear to me this would make it safer for pedestrians and safer for people going into and out of a very busy shopping precinct.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. With that, debate is closed and we'll vote on both motions 1 and 2. All those in favour and those against, that motion is carried. With that, we move on to item 12 and footpath policy minor amendment. There are two recommendations there. I'll be guided by you as to how you would like to proceed with those. Not. Would anyone like to move either 1 or 1 and 2? Councillor Mann? 1 and 2 together? Would anyone like to second those two? Councillor Henderson? Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to this? If not, I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. We move on to heading 13, minutes of council committee meetings, and 13.1 is Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee. Minutes of the meeting held 7th of April 2022. Councillor Henderson moving that way. Councillor Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. To agenda heading 14, subsidiaries and representative reports, and 14.1 is representative reports April 2022. The recommendations that we receive a note. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson moving. Someone to second that? Councillor Robertson. Speak to that. If not, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We move on to 14.2, South Australian Region Organisation of Councils, Draft Annual Business Plan 2022-23. The first recommendation is that we receive and note the report. Councillor Schofield moving that way. Second that. Councillor Robertson, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Would anyone like to speak to that motion? If not, that to a vote. All those. That's carried unanimously. There is the capacity for recommendation 2 for this report that council submit the following feedback. Is there an elected member that would like to move some feedback, or move that we suspend meeting procedures to discuss feedback that could be added and then move it en bloc? Councillor Robertson. Okay. Would you, sorry, microphone just for those that aren't in the room.
Yeah, I think that it's be worthwhile briefly discussing what might be in there. And I note also that it's really unfortunate we've just got a couple of days to make that submission.
Thank you. With that, I'll seek to suspend meeting procedures for a time of 10 minutes, whether we use it all or not. We can always cut it short. I'll need a show of hands, 2/3 in order to suspend them. If you don't think we should be giving feedback, there's an obvious way that you can do that as well. So show of hands as for the suspension of meeting procedures for a period of 10 minutes. That is not successful. So Councillor Robertson, you could move a motion that had your feedback in it, if you would like.
No, I just have a question, if I might, Mayor.
What's your question?
Deputy Mayor, if you wanted to put in a submission, if I wanted to put in a submission there in relation to this, it's just be to give that to the council by Friday.
Okay. So
is that correct?
Unless there is a motion with it containing it, it's not endorsed by council. But I'm not sure if an individual councillor could provide feedback on the content. That's okay. Was that your question, Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, if it could just, I note that Friday is the deadline, so we're not going to do anything on providing feedback as a council, it appears. So as a council law, can I just go ahead and
we will absolutely
just note that that's as a private council, or I'm not speaking on behalf of the.
Yeah,
council. Yeah.
Okay. We will get a response for you on that one. Are you okay if we move on?
Yep.
Beautiful. Oh, sorry. Group Manager Knight Stacey, you had a response to that one?
Thank you. Through the chair, just in regards to Councillor Robertson's question, the request actually came through within the letter that is asking for council's feedback. So it's not clear within the letter whether or not an individual councillor could make a response. However, we can chase that up. It would need to go in separately to a council submission, though, by council and on own behalf, if you wish to do one. But we can have a look at.
Thank you, Group Manager Knight Stacey. That's understood, Councillor Robertson.
Yep.
Beautiful. We'll move on to 14.3, which is Fleur Regional Waste Authority Business Plan 21-24 update and 2022-23 budget. We'll deal with recommendation 1 to receive and note this first. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield. Someone to second that? Councillor Lilly. Thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 2 is there. Someone like Councillor Lilly? Someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that recommendation? No. Would anyone like to speak to that recommendation? Councillor Glasbrook?
Look, I will just say a couple of things in relation to the budget. The main thing really that concerns me is the net financial liabilities ratio would be up to 129%, I believe. Kelly might need to make sure I've got that correct. That's a concern to me. It's a very high level of debt for that organisation, which is of course going to be borne by all of us councils. So that's my main concern really, I suppose. Increase of 9.3% is obviously a lot more than the inflation. But of course, that's in relation to the asbestos issue, which of course the debt is as well. I just thought with that level of debt and costs increasing, it appears that they've got 2 new positions. Again, I need to clarify that. It says in there there's a new curbside manager and a work health and safety corporate position. I just thought maybe it could be a time for them to watch their spending rather than increase their spending. But I don't know if Kelly has anything to say about either of those things.
Group Manager Knight Stacey.
Thank you. Through the chair, so you're right, Councillor Glasbrook, the financial indicators do show for next year that it's 119% for the net financial liabilities ratio, with a forecast for this year of 100%. That does include the asbestos remediation amounts, which has clearly blown that out amount. So within page, I think it is 100 of the agenda, it shows the variance between what that ratio looks like with and without the borrowings for asbestos contamination. And in regards to including the asbestos contamination, I note that it does drop down below that % by year plan and then reduces back. So in terms of the exposure, whilst it is concerning that rate has gone up because of the asbestos contamination, it does still appear to be financially sustainable in that it continues to go down after the next few years back to a level of around 50%. So yeah, a couple of years of that.
Thank you, Group Manager Knight Stacey. Director Rokonshinsky also has some comments around the staffing question, if you'd like, Councillor Glasbrook.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm aware from my role on the audit committee that there's been increased collections. If the green organics, for example, the extension with us, increased activity down in Victor Harbour, largely as a result of lifestyle change and COVID. That has increased demand on their Goolwa waste recycling depot and other depots in particular. So I'm aware that that is one of the reasons for their staffing increase. They've got a lot more activity happening as a facility. And I'm also aware that they've identified some of their risk management needing some attention. And that would be the reason for the additional work health, safety and risk management employee.
Thank you, Director Rokoczynski. Is there any further, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You know, really it would be nice to see any of our subsidiaries try and reduce their running costs, their expenditure. But we're in a situation of a catch-22 where, you know, we need to have this waste facility and services and we have to pay for it. But I look at the plan and I don't see any efficiencies built into it or any area where they try to find efficiencies. And I guess that's something which, you know, we as the part of a 4-member group of councils who oversee this subsidiary, that, you know, we're nice to do that. Let's not keep just handing out money all the time because they ask for it. I think we as a council should, to any subsidiary, you know, start producing efficiencies. You know, it's not we don't have deep in pockets where it's never ending. Some people would believe we do because we just raise rates and as we get our funding that way. But I think that, you know, we need to make a stand at some stage somewhere about just not accepting what's presented. I think we need to question it, put it back to them, revisit it with another plan to show some efficiencies and how you go improve that. Now, with COVID coming to an end, or is it? We don't know. The fact that people will start travelling overseas. They won't be coming to Victor Harbour like they have been over the last 2 years, which put a great impost on our collection. That may change, and we don't know that. And again, it's a little bit of crystal ball work here with their long-term financial plan, but I do agree that their liability ratio is quite high, and I think that relying on council to bail them out because of their process of detection of asbestos in that process and how they're moving ahead with that to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I'm not quite clear on because I haven't seen any reports come through actually identifying how their testing regime is working from now on. But I think really I can't support this plan and budget due to the fact that it's just, you know, just increasing. There's no relief to our community.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Lilly, do you want to close? Oh, good. We'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour and those against, that motion is carried. Waste collection, summer collection schedule. I think we'll receive and note the report first and then move on to the following recommendations. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Robertson moving and seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Now we have 3 other. Glasbrook.
Yes, well, I'd like to move recommendation 2 with an addition. So as it's worded there, and I have spoken earlier with our director, so there'll be a 4th dot point in number 2, which would read that council continue to monitor the public litter bins over the summer period and in liaison with the Fleur Regional Waste Authority, organise additional emptying of public litter bins as required. So the reason that I wanted to put that in there was because I believe that over the last Christmas period, we did have an issue with our public litter bins, and it was in this report that some of the people in the trial did rely on the public litter bins. So I think it's important for us to have our town looking spick and span in that time of the year. And I certainly went down through Victor many times over the Christmas period when the bins were overflowing and there was stuff. Look, so I don't really want that to happen again. And it could, if this does affect people, which I don't believe it should be a huge effect, they're actually getting more space in their bins, but it could go into other areas as well throughout the town. So I just think it's important that we add that bit. I do certainly support this. I support reducing waste going to landfill. We can get more stuff into our recycling and organic bins. I think it's going to be a win. But I think, you know, if there is a few teething issues, I'd like to have that fourth dot point in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Schofield, would you like to second that?
Yes, I would. And I'd like to just add to that, that around the foreshore, the railway station, it wasn't a very good look. And other areas of the town, people were complaining continually about the rubbish. And we're supposed to be a prime holiday destination. And sorry, but I think we need to lift our game in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Are there other members that would like to add to the discussion? If not, Councillor Glasbrook, any response? All good. We'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Which leaves recommendations 3 and 4. Someone like to move both of them? Councillor Lidley, both? Councillor Glasbrook, happy to second that? Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Oh, and those against? That's carried. Thank you. Five. Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority Draft Capital Budget 22-23. There are 2 recommendations there, guided by you as to how you wish to handle them. Councillor Schofield, are you moving one or both? Both? Someone like to second that? Councillor Lidley, seconding that. Would either of you like to speak? Councillor Schofield?
I think it is all set out in the paperwork in front of us. Happy to answer any questions if there are later on.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Lidley, would you like? No, all good. Would other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. One item that stands out to me is why do we need a second float? Because part of the reason for asking that is that I still don't believe that we've been told whether we're going to be operating 2 horse trams down at the causeway or 3. And in any case, the horse floats are it's taking horses down there. They can bring a second lot of horses back if required. But the why we are asking for a second horse float.
Director Rokaczynski, the answer for that one.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm advised that it is just about getting the horses to the site promptly and not having staff start so early. So having the ability to float two floats at the same time does mean that you don't have so many staff on so early, and particularly in daylight saving, we're talking in some of the early hours that they're undertaking a lot of the work. That's probably the most information I can give, just having spoken to the general manager.
Another question, is that the reason why we apparently need 2 work cars? So that the second one can pull the second float?
Councillor Kaczynski.
I'm not able to answer that specifically, but I wonder if our other member
Councillor Schofield.
might be able to.
Councillor Schofield, do you want to answer for that one?
Thank you. Yes, we do have a ute that is responsible for the float. It is also used for collecting hay and other jobs. The manager, while the ute and the float are in operation, our manager also attends other meetings. She has other business duties that are not just sitting at the causeway, and so it is required for that particular reason.
Yes, I'm sure there's an extremely busy schedule of meetings to be attended, but to me, you know, the amount for which we continue to throw capital at this enterprise is really really terrible. Because I don't see the justifications for this. It's just there are meetings to attend. Well, how many meetings, and why can't you organise to get, you know, the horses down to the tram depot in time for, how long does it take to get a pair of horses down there and then go back and pick up a second lot? Then you're going to have, you know, a second horse float down, taking up a park down at the causeway, sitting there all day long, waiting for what? To repeat the exercise at the end of the day. To me, this enterprise that we've got here is just gets continually given by this council monstrous amounts of money, gets given a free pass on everything, including $420,000 subsidy a year when we're supposed to be independent of the council, and is allowed to, you know, put in an accounts which seem to show that, oh yeah, it's breaking even when it isn't. And I don't see the justification. Where is the justification for, you know, the second float, for a second vehicle? Why can't the people we employ in the or employed by the horse-drawn tram be able to organise themselves so they don't need all this extra capital equipment? We're asking for a tractor mower slasher there. Why are we buying one? Why can't we get one of the council ones to do that work? Of course, it's got to be compensated for getting a contractor to come and provide the mowing that's necessary. Otherwise, you're going to have a mower slasher sitting there, you know, for most of the year doing nothing. So to me, it's just stuff where this authority has gotten used to the business where all they do is, oh, we've got a need for something. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, let's shove it in front of council. They'll vote for it. You don't have to justify really what's in here, because what's in here is just, you know, there's nothing to justify these additional capital requirements. You know, to me, this draft capital budget is just another exercise in, you know, more and more and more money being handed out for what I think the horse-drawn tram is a great institution in Victor. I just really object to the way that it's being run.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
And Councillor Robertson's right, we may well vote for it, the members around the table. My question was with regards to the second float. Has there been calculations done on the cost savings? I understand the reasoning for chopping out the early hours in the morning. Is there a model, has that been modelled on how much that would save as far as wages to be able to do that efficiency? So rather than starting at 6 o'clock in the morning or the like, I'm sure that there's a remodelled thing that would give us some indication of how much of the $25,000 expenditure for a float would actually carve off the wages.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Director Rokochinski.
So I don't have any of those calculations here, but certainly it was the topic of much discussion with the board. I know that they went through the same scrutiny of the need for the float, and they're obviously recommending it to council. I'm aware operationally it's just they're not able to get their horses where they need to in a timely manner, and it's part of their business plan to have that many horses in operation and to have that. The timing's important for the starting of the tram and to get the turnaround across to the island.
Thank you, Director Rokochinski. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, thank you. Just like to agree with the other two councillors and ask really not only why do we need 2 horse floats, but why do we need a new horse float every 5 years? I would have thought a horse float would last a long, long time. There's bearings and things that would need to be replaced, which is inexpensive. So I wondered that. I also wondered why the work car needed to be replaced every 3 years. It seems fairly frequent to me. I'd love to have a new car every 3 years, but it doesn't seem to happen. And even things like the gator and stuff, I question. I bought a second-hand quad bike 20 years ago on my farm, and it's still going. So I question again the amount of money that we seem to spend. Is it entirely necessary? So,
thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Director Rokochinski.
Through the chair. So this is their first time having a capital budget, and this is their best estimate for when the turnover needs to occur. They'll, like council does with each of our assets and our asset management plan, we get to a year, we look at what the need is, and if that vehicle, that float doesn't need to be replaced, then they'll carry it on. But it does get a point where maintenance increases if you don't turn it over. And obviously being like council, we get some tax benefits off purchase and sale of vehicles, different to other organisations where it might be cheaper to, say, lease a vehicle. It hits our capital budget, it would hit an operating budget for a different model. But ultimately, they'll look at the market and what the best timing is for the turnaround of those vehicles, and this is their best starting point. As I said, it's their first capital budget, so I imagine there's still a lot of refining to do, but I don't believe it's their intention to just change over when it hits that year without a reasonable consideration as to whether that's actually suitable.
Thank you, Director Rokochinski. Would any other members like to add to debate? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions first, because again, to me, there's insufficient information in here supporting the additional assets capital budget. Talking about 2 floats, 2 cars. So we have 4 staff on moving 2 floats with 2 vehicles in the morning. Now, if this goes through, or you have 1 vehicle allocated to draw 2 floats, so they go 1 float with horses, drop it off, go back and get the 2nd float with horses, drop it off. I'm not quite sure how it's going to operate in that context, because it's not clear in here. If the other vehicle, which is more of a sedan or type of vehicle, is that able to tow the 2nd float, or is just going to be used for a work vehicle for the manager and other projects? It says here on page 200, the City of Victor Harbor, by gifting assets to the authority, has expressed an appetite for the authority to reduce its dependence on council by managing certain assets associated with the horse tram services. That's fine, but what it's done is the council has to approve this draft capital budget, have some control over it, but we are a guarantor for the loans that the authority will take out. So in hindsight, we are going to be not going to reduce the cost to council if the authority cannot afford to pay its loans on these capital items, or etc., or they need more or whatever. Again, to me, there's not enough information in here to warrant and justify the additional expenditure and the costs. And of course, it's only just purchasing. It's not about the operating side of these extra vehicles and the cost of insurance, cost of maintenance. That's an operating budget, not a capital. But again, this is again in isolation to the whole running of the authority, which I think is missing in this capital budget. I think we need to look at it closely. And at the moment, again, to me, there's not enough information in here to warrant a decision by me tonight to support the capital budget, because again, as other members said, there's no justification as to why we're having it and how they're going to be used and how they're going to save. Where's the modelling on savings, you know, by having these additional equipment? That's against operating as well as capital purchase. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Camp. Is there any further questions or commentary? If not, councillor Schofield.
Thank you. It was this chamber that agreed to have a section 41 to run the horse tram. When the authority took over the running of the horse tram, most of the assets were completely run down. The assets belonged to the council. During the time that the board's been in place, first of all, they had a 6 months wait for a new manager to be appointed. They've had closures of the causeway. They've had COVID, and they have still managed to keep the operation going and the horses in top condition, the best they've ever been. They did receive a grant to have a look at the marketing and the worth of the horse tram to the City of Victor Harbor and the businesses and residents in this town. You all received a copy of that, which I hope you read. This is moving forward in what you have actually asked. There are a lot of things happening that are on the ground at this particular stage, which has been mentioned before in the chamber, and I hope that you've got those issues on board. There are things that are happening, and you will, in your next report, see a financial income that I think you may be pleased with. You have often said that we don't know what's going to happen in the future in any business, and the Horse Tram Authority is trying to run as a business. Unfortunately, it doesn't have 100% say in what it wants to do. It is reliant on the members that sit in this chamber to make some of those decisions. And sometimes the decisions are made without understanding the full operation of the business. If any of us who have had animals will understand the need for good equipment, the need for specialised fencing for horses, and the need to have qualified, trained staff, especially when we are running an organisation in the public. I have been critical in the past and the start of the authority, but I'm very confident in the way that it's being run and the decisions that are being made. They're not being made by one person, they're made by a complete board, and often coming back and getting referrals from council. Out of the amount of money that is given to the horse tram by the council in your budget of 415,000, I believe, there is around 100,000 of that that comes back to council for every assistance that the horse tram asks council for, you charge. So, you know, at the moment we're going okay. We were what, $12,000, $12,000 under our budget last year. Now, how many businesses can say that when you come through COVID and what, 4 or 5 months of not being able to operate on the causeway? So I really think that I appreciate the feedback that you are giving the authority, but sometimes I think with these other section 41s and 42s, we sit here and make judgment on things that we really don't understand. And I think to do the right thing by these authorities, that we need to clearly understand where they're coming from, what their plans are, and understanding that their operations are all completely different. This is an agriculture and a tourist business.
Thank you, councillor Schofield. With that, debate is closed and we'll put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Past 8 o'clock means that we are due for a 10-minute break. Adjourn for 10 minutes and resume at 8:20. it being 8:20, we might resume the meeting. And we were up to item 15.1, which is the mayoral report. The recommendations that be received and noted. Someone happy to move that way? Councillor Henry, Councillor Lilly, moving and seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item would be elected member reports, but unless there are reports, there is none, or we shall move straight past it to item 16, which is matters of urgency, and we do have one matter of urgency, which is 16.1, matter of urgency, Main Street Stage 4 construction update. There is 5 recommendations there. I think we should start with receiving and noting the report and then move forward from there. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Kemp doing so. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Mann, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to receiving the report? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question. The last time we spoke on this matter was in confidence. Now it's the confidentiality apart from mentioning anything about costings or contracts. Is that correct? Yep.
Director Haver.
Through the chair, that's correct. So the matter that there's actually contaminated soil isn't confidential. It's just pertaining to the contractual obligations and the cost, because we still need to negotiate that.
Are there any other members that would like to speak to this motion, receiving and noting the report? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. There are 4 recommendations there. I'll be guiding how we shall proceed.
I'd like to do them each separately if we can. I think that's appropriate.
Excellent. Councillor Robertson, happy to move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lilly, were you moving recommendation 2 then? Yeah, happy to do so. And then Councillor Robertson seconding it. Yeah, cool. So Councillor Lilly has moved, Councillor Robertson has seconded the second recommendation. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson? No. Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
More of a question, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I see the recommendation there is the identification of contaminated soil. Will the community find out exactly what is the contamination in a report later on, once it's been identified exactly what it is? We know there's contaminated soil, but the community doesn't know exactly what it is. So should we not communicate that to communities, saying that, yes, there might be a public health issue, but personally, it's not going to be a major concern to people for whatever reason. So I think people now know that there's contaminated, but people are asking the question, what is it?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Director Hayter.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. So we have said that it's combustible byproduct. We do have a contamination report that's 180 pages long, and 174 pages of those are chemical compounds. What we are told is that it is combustible, meaning something that potentially previously is burnt. So it may have been burnt wood, it may have been, I mean, this is what's in the report, it may have been degrading bitumen, but it's not an uncommon source of contamination. So the environmental scientists says they can't exactly pinpoint where it came from. They know from the 170 odd pages what is actually in there, but they have also reassured us that it is not an imminent health threat, that the health threat comes from long-term exposure and long-term direct exposure. So not just walking by, and they said to us not even just touching it, but touching it or inhaling it, ingesting it over long periods, long periods. So we know that it's not an imminent health threat. So certainly in terms of community, that's why we've put this information in the public, just to reassure community it is not a public health concern. There are contamination levels there that we need to deal with and deal with appropriately. Unfortunately, sealing under the road would have been a good solution, but as we know, we can't do that. So we are aiming to get that information out into the public arena, that it is not a public health risk per se.
Councillor Kemp.
Supplement question if I may. Because there was a service station down the end of Ocean Street, has it been identified that whether the tanks are still there or been filled in or removed, because they can be a contaminant as well, fuel tanks underground of the service station?
Director Hayter.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll have to take that on notice. I'm not sure if those tanks are still there. My understanding is that the contamination that has been found is not petroleum based, but I could take that on notice and find out if those tanks are still there. That's not something that we've tested for.
Excellent. Is there further discussion on this item? If not, Councillor Lilly, did you want to close debate at all? No. We'll put that to a vote. This is recommendation 2. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to recommendation 3. That is the council scheduling impacts of the contamination and multiple options for proceeding, and consequently approve consultation with Business Victor Harbour and relevant traders to seek input about the preferred scheduling, and it's slightly edited to options 1 through 3 so that it lines up with the wording in the report. Councillor Lilly, happy to move that way. Councillor Henderson seconding that. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, as discussed in our workshop, I feel that it is very much appropriate that we keep the business community as informed as we can throughout the whole process and take consultation from them to ensure that we're satisfying satisfying and allaying any fears, concerns that they may have. In my mind, personally, as a representative, it's that's got to be front and centre in this whole process. And I believe it has been from the start of us planning stage 4, that consultation has been upfront and going. It needs to be maintained and ramped up, particularly with this situation. We need to give them confidence and take confidence from them that we can do this to best suit them. They're the ones that we need to look after.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Henderson, did you wish to speak to this item? No. Are there other members that wish to speak? Councillor Glassbrook.
Just a question as to why we're only presenting 1 to 3. Is that what I heard? Where we were presented with 6 options. I just wondered why you now decided only go to 1 and 3.
Yeah, so that is in the report here, but the short answer is that's the suggestion that came out of the workshop, I believe. Director Hayter might want to add to that.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Yes, so we put in 1 to 3 specifically as based on the tenor of the discussion at the workshop, that elected members and balancing the cost and scheduling implications, that 1 to 3 would be the preferred options.
Okay, well, I agree with that. I mean, certainly my option is within that 1 to 3, but I would have thought that we'd give Business Victor Harbour at least the opportunity to have the look at the 6. But anyway, that's only my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Are there other members that wish to speak? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. This is the only scheduling impacts we're considering here is relating to the contamination. But there are some other issues we know that might also affect the scheduling, such as other items that might be found or might not be found in the during the digging, and then also, of course, the availability of materials, someone for finishing of the work. But on the major one, at least initially, because it's going to push back the rest of the job until closer to the Christmas period, which is important for trading, etc. That the options 1 to 3 are relevant, but I'm just wondering here whether this is the right place to ask a question about the three options that are provided in there, which are the option 1, which is to start in June 22, push through and without stopping until February 23. The option 2, which is staged, so June 22 start, November 22 pause on work, and then recommence on February 23 in the new year, and end on April 23. And then the option 3, which is just to throw everything at the project, everything we can, and that is starting on June 22nd and finishing on December 22nd. What's not put in here is there any estimates in that of how much night work is going to be involved in those 3 options? Obviously, I guess option 2, probably very little, but the other 1 and 3 where there's continuous work, but going through to February, or throwing everything at the option 3 and getting it done by December 22nd. And what we know from previous reports on this project, that night work was going to be the only way that the work could be accelerated, and that it would have a very significant increase in the costs. But I noticed that on the cost estimates for these 3 option down here, it doesn't align with the business of night work. So my question in these 3 options is there any night work envisaged in any of those options 1 to 3?
Director Haber.
Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. No, at this stage, the contractor is looking at throwing additional resources at, but not taking on night shift, noting previous feedback. There are other ramifications, as you will have noted there, around disruption. But at this stage, they're trying to throw everything at it and look at a different schedule, doing things simultaneously or concurrently to meet those scheduled deadlines without night works at this stage.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other members that wish to speak to this?
Sorry, a question. Deputy Mayor, so this recommendation is the council note the scheduling impacts. So it doesn't later on say which one of those options is one that is preferred.
So it's saying that consequently that we're going to consult with Business Victor Harbour and the relevant traders around options 1, 2 and 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about consulting. It's not about council set a preference yet.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Lilly, did you want to close?
Yeah, we'll do. Just to reiterate that, I mean, I don't operate a business in Main Street or in Albert Place, and I don't understand the impacts directly on those businesses there that any one of these options will have. Going from speaking with people in the Main Street, I have an idea of what might work, but we need to make sure that we do thorough consultation rapidly to get the full picture from all of those traders who would be impacted, so we can really understand. And yeah, the consultation needs to be collaborative. We need to work with these traders to make sure we do get a good outcome and the right outcome, so we can make the best decision here. And that's what this recommendation, this motion number 3 is about, is giving approval to consult with Business Victor Harbour and the relevant traders. So we'll get through this one and then we'll move on to number 4, no doubt.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. That closes debate. We'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We move on to recommendation 4, that administration present a report detailing consultation and a recommendation for the preferred consultation schedule council meeting to be called as soon as practicable. Councillor Henderson moving that way and Councillor Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question. There have been emails and a bit of discussion about, is there a possibility of compensation, paid out to the traders or businesses for inconvenience, as was in stage 3 Coral Street upgrade, where a private car park was sealed for inconvenience to the property person of that property, and council paid for it, my understanding, according to certain documentation. So would that be part of the discussion with Business Victor Harbour and the traders in the consultation process if that question was raised by them? Because we seem to have set a precedence already that council will pay out for convenience of the construction work on council property infrastructure. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be part of the discussion or not.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair, no, Councillor Kemp, our urgency at the moment is around working out the schedule and dealing with the contamination. In terms of that potential compensation or rate dispensation, we are researching that and what is viable, what is potential, which will come back to chamber. But at this stage, this consultation is only about how we deal with the contamination and the scheduling. Any form of financial compensation that the elected members may like to consider needs that research to come back to the chamber first, and we don't have that. Although we are working on it, we need to bring that back to you for consideration first.
Thank you, Director Hayter. Would any other elected members like to discuss this? If not, Councillor Henderson, did you want to close debate? No. We'll put that one to a vote then. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Resolution 5, that council support the contribution of the project, including an addition between 1.2 million and 2.2 million, subject to confirmation of amount and endorsement of the preferred scheduling option. Councillor Schofield moving that way and Councillor Henderson seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a question again. It says in the budget implications that this will be funded through cash advance, so basically borrowed money. We have had some cancelled projects and things that there's no opportunity for us to channel some of that money in. I know we have allocated some of it, but just a question to Kelly Knight Stacey.
Group Manager Knight Stacey.
Thank you. Through the chair, we would be looking to offset using cash flow as much as possible, but if it was required at any particular stage, we would use cash advance debentures and pay them down as quick as we can, rather than using a new loan. So worst case scenario would be that variable CADs, but we were trying to do that as we're trying not to do that as much as possible. Cash flow.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Question, Deputy Mayor. It was raised at a previous meeting, and the council was following up. Did we hear anything back from the mutual liability scheme as to whether or not any of these additional costs would be able to be claimed?
I believe we have. Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Robertson. We have in fact heard today that our insurance does not cover us for contamination. The exception there is if a third party lodges a claim against council for contamination that impinges on their property. So in terms of the resolving the contamination, dealing with it, no, our insurance doesn't cover it.
Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, did you want to close? No. We'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. With that, that is all the recommendations for us in relation to that matter of urgency. We move on to questions on notice 17. There being on to questions without notice. Councillor Robertson, I believe you have.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. 3. Question on, the first one is a question on the Anchorage development. Have any knowledge of what's happening in terms of the construction of this development?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'll direct that to Director Padhouse.
Thanks, Councillor Robertson, through the Deputy Mayor. As at about 3 weeks ago, inquiries I made through the state was that a development application hadn't yet been lodged by the Anchorage proponent. So I know about where their application's up to in terms of their sense of timing and what that looks like at the moment. I happened to be sitting in a presentation last week where a representative from the Anchorage addressed a number of people and suggested that they were looking to get a start on the development proper in terms of on-site towards the end of this year. So perhaps more next year. The people assembled there, but that's as far as I know at this point.
Thank you, Director Padhouse.
And the last one with just a very small amount of preamble, just to let the council know that the Penguin Monitoring Group on Granite Island has retrieved about 20 penguin carcasses washed up on Victor Harbour beaches so far in April. And the birds were generally underweight. There's an urgent need to determine what the cause of death is because it's a highly unusual event. We basically have had about 60 odd chicks fledged and gone to sea over the last 3 years. So having 20 odd dying is another blow to the continued existence of the birds on Granite Island. Normally in the past, carcasses were sent to Adelaide for microscopy to find out what it was that the birds were dying from, but the Department of Environment has stopped funding microscopies for the last 3 years. But the carcasses that are being picked up off the beaches are being stored in the Department of Environment deep freeze, but it's filling up, and when it fills up, it'll be emptied. So those birds will be lost. As a matter of urgency, my question is, can the council write to the Department of Environment and Water and ask them to ensure that microscopies are carried out as soon as possible on all the carcasses held by the due office that have been picked up in the bay here in Victor Harbour in the last month or so?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'll direct that towards Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we'd be happy to write to DEW and ask what their process is and what their intent is. We can strongly support, if the chamber wishes, that we urge that they carry out whatever they need to do as quickly as possible.
If it's possible, Deputy Mayor, I'd propose a motion that the notes the concern of the council at the need to determine the cause of death of the large number of penguins and request the Department of Environment to ensure that microscopies are carried out.
Absolutely, we'll deal with that under motions without notice. Yep.
Okay. And the third one was, question was, when is the horse-drawn track renewal due to begin?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Looking towards Director Rokoczynski in relation to a horse tram track
I'll
renewal.
have to take that on notice unless Kathy's able to answer.
Okay.
Kathy is.
Thank you. Through the chair, the tracks are due to start, I believe, replacement work. So we scheduled it specifically to be after the penguin breeding season. So the start will be next week, all going according to plan.
Are there any other questions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a follow-up question on the horse-drawn tram tracks. Who is delivering the track replacement program? I can't recall seeing a tender process or using the one that was halted, 12 months ago. What's happening in that space of who actually laying the tracks down?
Thank you. Director Hayter.
Thank you, through the chair. Good question. Gives us the opportunity to brag about our operations team. So we are doing that in-house. So it'll be the operations team working with the project managers from the capital team delivering that project.
Are there any other questions without notice? If not, we shall move on. Motions on notice. There are none. We move on to motions without notice. Councillor Robertson, you would like to move a motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, that noting the Victor Harbour Council concern about the very high death rates and the need to determine the cause of death, that the council write to the Department of Environment requesting that immediate attention be given to necroscopies being carried out on the dead bird carcasses that are in the Department of Environment freezer in Victor Harbour.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do you happen to have that in writing?
No.
Okay. We will see what we can get up there, and then please adjust as you see fit.
If you can shorten it in any way, then I'd like
No worries.
the Victor Harbour Council urges the Minister of Environment to ensure that the penguins carcasses.
About writing to Jew about the penguin carcasses and making sure something is done with them as opposed to throwing them in the
Immediately,
bin.
yes, before they get thrown away.
Yeah.
Then we'll never know.
Sorry, Councillor Robertson, what was the name of that procedure specifically? And how do you spell it?
Necrospy, I think. Plural, I think, is IES, but necro being death and.
I think we've got it. Thank you.
We've got Council Administration right to Jew requesting that immediate attention be given to the necroscopy being carried out to determine the cause of death of large numbers of little penguins along the south coast.
No, in Encounter Bay, really.
In Encounter Bay.
Mm.
Cool. Happy with that, Councillor Robertson?
Yep, happy.
Councillor Schofield, happy to second that? Wonderful. Would either of you like to speak further to that? No. Would any member like to speak to that? Councillor Henderson.
I suspect if these bodies are already being frozen, there will be a lot of tissue damage, so the necroscopy examinations may not be very easy to do.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Yeah, Councillor.
I thought would have been that the scientists and the experts in the Department of Environment would already be alert to the fact that if there are, in fact, indeed a high number or an unusually high number of penguin deaths, the penguin expert or the marine bird expert would already be across this and may have or would have done a necroscopy or whatever other studies that they would on this. So I don't feel that it's our place as a council, and I'm one of those members on the council, to be writing to the experts and saying, can you do something with the matters that you have actually retrieved from the ocean? If they're in the hands of the Department of Environment and Water, they're already there for them to determine what they would do if they do feel that there is an issue. So I wouldn't put my own name to it. So I'm not going to put my name to the vote to say that the Victor Harbour Council feels that this should be done.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Are there any other members that would like to speak? If not, Councillor Robertson, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, the Department of Environment has withdrawn almost totally its funding of penguin activities on Granite Island over the last 3 or 4 years, including microscopies. The dead birds on the beach are picked up by a group and delivered to the Department of Environment. And as soon as that refrigerator is full up or space is needed, they will put them in the bin. So in the old days, 5, 10 years ago, the fresh carcasses would have been immediately taken to Adelaide, but that's not the case anymore. So to me, the issue here is that very large mass death events in our critical wildlife. And I can't emphasize enough how much the penguins mean to the economy of Victor Harbour. The Granite Island, without the penguins, is going to be a very sorry sell in the tourist market. Granite Island, with a viable penguin population, is another story. So we, as a council, we need our own interests in this regard, and that means that we need to find out what it is that is the deaths of these penguins as best as can be determined at this stage, and we ask the department to do its job.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. With that, debate is closed and I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour and those against. That motion is carried. Are there any other? There being none, we'll move on to heading 21, confidential items, and 21.1, which is confidential local government rates oversight scheme, ESCOSA draft framework and approach LGA consultation paper. The first recommendation is that we go into confidence. Councillor Mann moving that way and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I fail to see in this report where it's justified that we do this in confidence. This anything to do with rates in this area is of huge interest to our population. It's an immensely tricky and complex subject, and every opportunity should be taken to educate the people about what it is that determines those rates and how they're applied, etc., etc. And so, to me, it's this should not be in confidence. This is purely a bureaucratic process here, and I think that we should be making sure that our population has every opportunity to get to come to grips with it. There's no benefit to us whatsoever to keep this in confidence, and further, what we do to our reputation then is to be a council working in secret, when in fact we shouldn't be, we don't need to be, and so I will be voting against this being put into confidence.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I think the report states fairly clearly that this document has been provided by the LGA Association of South Australia to us on a confidential basis, and they've requested that the report itself be kept confidential. So if you didn't want to talk about the report at all, we could discuss it not in confidence, but otherwise I think it is within the bounds of our the reasons confidentiality orders exist. Would any other member like to speak to this? Councillor Kemp.
I do, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I do feel that what I've read through this documentation, the position of the LGA requesting our support for their submission to SCOSA on rate oversight. And to me, I think it's important for our community to understand where our council sits and what we think about this, and how can our community know where Victor Harbour Council sits in the scheme of things with this type of program, where, you know, we support or not support it. And when you look at the evidence base in the information they provide there, which I won't talk about because it's in confidence, but I think that understanding where LGA is coming from, my personal opinion, they don't want this to go public before they submit it to SCOSA, and possibly don't want feedback from the various communities around the state on their position. So I think I support that. I don't support going into confidence for the reasons that's been stated, and also what Councillor Robertson has stated.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Robertson, do you have a question? That's an excellent question. Director Rokaczynski or Pat House, would either of you like to answer that one? Or Kelly? Can we release the response we give to the LGA to the public, as long as it doesn't contain the report from the material from the original report?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I can answer that. Sorry, I couldn't hear Councillor Roberts' question because in regards to our response, we wouldn't be able to provide response within the LGA consultation paper, but we could definitely put our own submission into a SCOSA that contains the information that council would like and release that publicly. So the SCOSA document, the LGA consultation paper. So there'd be nothing to prevent us to submission as a council straight to a SCOSA.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Robertson? Beautiful. Would any other member like to speak to this? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion's carried. So we will now move into confidence.